Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood is one of the best shows and one of the best anime series I've ever seen. However, I don't think it's perfect. I give it an 8 out of 10, I have some issues with it, and even if the story was what I consider to be absolute perfection, I probably wouldn't like it as much as I like other shows, because of the quirky animation. All the cartoonish stuff the characters do whenever there's a humorous moment is a style that is not for me. I can enjoy it if I'm really into the story, but I definitely prefer when this kind of stuff doesn't happen, like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, a show that is full of light-hearted moments and there's plenty of comedy to go around, but that one scene when they went full-on anime, that scene had me worried for a second. Thankfully they only used it at one time, unlike in FMA Brotherhood. Since I had never seen the first show that was adapted from the source material from 2003, I decided to check it out. I wanted to compare both of them, see whether the stories start to deviate from each other, see if the animation isn't as cartoonish, and decide which one is better, or at least which one I liked the most. And from the first 2 episodes, I can already tell it was a good idea to check this out. This has by far a much better start than Brotherhood. Although I enjoyed the first episode of Brotherhood, it felt a lot like a throwaway episode, as in, what happens in it isn't really that consequential to the overall story, and whatever information they manage to transmit to the audience about the characters and the universe are things that we would find out in later episodes anyway, and the water-bending alchemist wasn't really that interesting of a character. That's why I'm more predisposed to skip this episode. I don't think it was the best way to open the show. Brotherhood only starts to get really interesting the moment Scar becomes more involved with the story. That's when the plot got spicy. But in 2003's Fullmetal Alchemist, the plot is apparently engaging and important right from the get-go, to the point where it got me excited enough to make a whole video on it. And yes, there will be spoilers for both shows, at least for this part of the story.
Fullmetal Alchemist. Fullmetal Alchemist.
The first 2 episodes are equivalent to the 3rd episode of Brotherhood, when Alphonse and Edward went to a town in the middle of the desert and had an encounter with a priest called Father Cornello, someone who was using a philosopher's stone to trick people into believing that he was God's representative on Earth. And although in Brotherhood this was just another one of those episodes that I always skip because I find the story lackluster and gives a vibe of Case of the Week, like when I saw this for the first time, I thought the show was just going to be about the brothers traveling around the country and solving mysteries involving the Philosopher's Stone, without a major long-running narrative. Not that different from Supernatural, but that wasn't the case. FMA Brotherhood is one of the few anime series that tells a gigantic, engrossing, ambitious story, where pretty much every episode is a continuation of the previous episodes, instead of just telling a different adventure with the same characters, as a lot of anime series tend to. And that is the reason why I don't think Brotherhood's version of Father Cornello's story is as good as this one. You can argue that it's unfair for me to compare both versions, since 2003 version uses 2 episodes, while Brotherhood does it in just 1, so it's kind of an unfair comparison. One dedicates more time and effort into developing the story. But at the same time, I don't see why Brotherhood couldn't have done the story more justice and used more than 1 episode. It was their choice as far as I know. The first episode literally opens with a flashback of Al and Ed's failed attempt at bringing their mother back, along with explaining what alchemy is and the principle of equivalent exchange, aspects that are kind of important and relevant to know right away. Then the real plot of the episode begins. The brothers are traveling through the desert to reach the town where Father Cornello is, and before getting there we have the first moment of cartoonish nonsense, much to my disappointment. But truth be told, I did enjoy it. I think I'm more used to it by now, given the amount of times I have seen FMA Brotherhood and more recently Dr. Stone. Afterwards they start exploring the city and reach a fountain of wine, and I just love everything about this version of the story. It is such a much more fleshed out beginning than what Brotherhood did, gives you a completely different vibe on the same story. The way Father Cornello's broadcast starts is a vast improvement on what the 2009 anime did. There we barely hear anything. The show preferred to have this montage explaining who Father Cornello is to the audience. But in this version, the first thing we hear is beautiful music that puts you at ease. And when Father Cornello starts speaking, the visuals are filled with shots of the city and people praying. It doesn't matter if they're in a public place or at home. Everyone is praying, except for Al and Ed. Really enhances the point that they are outsiders in a foreign land. Then they learn about who Father Cornello is by asking the people around them, and it ends with Rose taking them to the church so they can know more. I find this type of storytelling far more interesting and engaging than just a montage of people floating around and a random guy telling how awesome Father Cornello is. Afterwards, we have a moment where Rose asks Father Cornello if the brothers can stay with the church, and we see her incredible devotion towards him. Later, we see her in a graveyard and understand why she's like this. Father Cornello promised to resurrect her boyfriend who died in an accident. And this is something that she and the brothers have in common. They both have someone dear to them that at one point in their lives wanted to bring back from the dead. And while the brothers have already come to the realization that this is impossible, Rose hasn't. And her development throughout these two first episodes is far superior and leaves a stronger impact than her counterpart in Brotherhood. I honestly didn't care for her in that series, I just found her cute. While in this one, besides being cute, I can actually relate to her and see Rose as more than just the disposable new character of the week. Later on, after Edward has his little monologue on what ingredients are necessary to make a human being, the church makes the first move against the brothers. And it's always fun watching someone being freaked out by the fact that Alphonse is just an empty suit of armor. And the ending of the first episode is pure perfection. Ed reveals that his right arm, alongside his left leg, are both mechanic, or automail as it's called in the show, and they couldn't have ended it on a better note, just leaving me curious and wanting to see what happens next. And so I watched the second episode, twice actually, because after Al and Ed were captured by those statues, for some reason Ed was the only one who was handcuffed and trapped in one of the rooms of the church, while Al was apparently free and went on to steal the church's bell so they could ring it and stop Daenerys from burning down King's Landing. Oh wait, that's the wrong show. And I didn't quite understood what had happened, but it turns out that the church had already destroyed Al's suit of armor, or at least they thought they did. I can't believe I missed the fact that this armor, pretending to be Al, is standing above one of those things that all the other statues of Lyfo have beneath them. I knew there had to be a reason for why Alphonse wasn't fighting back when they were surrounded. I also appreciate the fact that the episode itself doesn't reveal how this was done in later scenes. It leaves something for people to pick up on in second viewings, and that is always welcome. I love when shows and movies do that. Afterwards, we have more scenes with Rose, and I can't believe Brotherhood decided to skip over Rose and her boyfriend's reunion. This sequence is great, makes Rose a more complete character. That's what these two first episodes are really about. Rose. Sure, we are introduced to the brothers, the universe of the show, and all the mystery with alchemy and the Philosopher's Stone, but at its core, these two first episodes tell the story about the impact the Ulrich brothers had on Rose, helping her come to the realization that it is impossible to bring people back from the dead, and she needs to move on with her life. There were just two other plot points that I also want to mention. The first one is the way Edward managed to trick Father Cornello into telling him everything. It makes so much more sense to have the microphone behind Ed hidden in a hole in the wall than it did with him leaving the microphone on the ground and hoping that somehow Father Cornello didn't notice it. Like it's literally next to his feet. How the hell didn't he see it? This is one of the small but frequent moments throughout Brotherhood that I consider to be a plot contrivance. If you don't know what a plot contrivance is, it's something that happens in stories that is hard to believe because of how convenient it is. Like how it's hard to believe that Father Cornello didn't see the fucking microphone on the floor. The guy was lured to this room and told Edward everything about his plan just because. It makes no sense. While in this version, Edward is handcuffed, Cornello is the one that goes to him, Alphonse is presumed dead, and there's really no point in hiding anything from him since he's planning on killing him. In Brotherhood, they literally put the fight on pause just so we can have this moment. Here, it happens as a result of previous events. They didn't need to make Father Cornello look dumb so Edward could outsmart him. And the other moment was how Envy transformed into Father Cornello and managed to trick the people of that town for a second time. In Brotherhood, that doesn't happen until episode 5, and they never fully explain why some of the people go back to believe in Father Cornello. Really makes the people of this town look incredibly naive. But in 2003's version, this is the last sequence of the second episode. We have Envy disguised as Cornello but in different clothes, so it makes it seem like the priest from before was a fake. It ends with Envy pretending to resurrect some birds and people cheering. If this is the same thing that happened in Brotherhood, then they should have showed it. Or at least they should have showed something. They don't show anything. That's the problem. They just expect the audience to believe that the people of that town are really fucking dumb. And this isn't one of the best parts of Brotherhood. Anyway, I'm not planning on making more videos on Fullmetal Alchemist. I wasn't planning on making this one either, but then I saw the first 2 episodes and had the urge to make one. I am going to keep on watching the 2003 series, and if I have more to say, then I'll make more videos. But for now, this is it. Anyway, see you next time.